Welcome, everyone, and good evening. I am so excited to have this conversation tonight. My name is Tommy Messenger, and I'm one of the co-founders of the K through 12 Impact Community and Academies. And if you're joining us tonight, then you are officially making history. This is our very first webinar, first of many to come. And so welcome everyone to When the Classroom Isn't Big Enough, Finding Purpose on the Other Side of Education. So tonight is all about a conversation for educators who find themselves starting to wonder what life could look like outside the classroom. And so we're joined here by my friend and colleague, Kelly Montes De Oca. She's one of the co-founders of the K through 12 Impact Academies and Community, a lifelong teacher, district leader, state advisor, and EdTech executive. Kelly supported learners and educators for more than 30 years, and her journey reflects what so many of you might be wondering: how to honor your identity as an educator while exploring new pathways of purpose and impact. That being said, Kelly, how are you doing tonight?
I'm well, Tommy. So excited to be here. Like you said, we're making history tonight.
Making history, that's
Yeah.
for sure. And so if you're joining us, we have a slate of great questions we're going to work through. And so, but if you have a question, you can drop it at any point. You see at the bottom of your screen a little question icon. So feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A and we will be sure to get to them. And so before we kind of work through those questions, Kelly, would you mind sharing a little about your background? You know, what subjects did you teach? What roles did you have in education? And what kind of roles did you have as you stepped out of the classroom?
Yeah, longtime educator, over 30 years in education. So started out back when you couldn't actually get a teaching job in the early 90s, which seems strange right now since we have such a huge teacher shortage. And all I wanted to teach was elementary school, particularly first grade or kindergarten, and ended up in a fifth grade classroom in Lawndale, California, near Watts. It really loved it. I taught a self-contained fifth grade for 4 years, and again, very different times than now. We had low enrollment, so first hired, first out. And so they said, hey, we love you. We don't want to lose you. How would you feel about going over to the eighth grade campus and teaching eighth grade humanities? We'll get you, in there. And so I did that and loved that. And like so many people, I was the primary breadwinner for my family, and like teaching, especially back then in the
Yeah.
early 90s, was not sustainable. So I began to look at other roles and started doing some coaching. So I became a district coach, did a lot of work in gifted and talented. So I was the gifted and talented coordinator in Lawndale. And then again, when I moved to Manhattan Beach, and served in a variety of roles in traditional public schools. I transitioned about 20 years ago to a charter school network and became the chief academic officer for the charter school network. We grew that network from 3 schools to 17 schools. So we serve underserved populations in Los Angeles. We were dual enrollment and early college ready organization, and I just loved it. I loved teaching. If I would have stayed as a teacher forever. In fact, as a chief academic officer, you'd find me lurking the hallways and co-teaching with teachers just so I could get my daily fix. Also been a long time university adjunct faculty member. So UCSD, you're down your neck of the woods, Tommy. Yeah. So my last 4 years as chief academic officer, we received a $60 million Gates Foundation grant, which was working on teacher effectiveness. And as we were putting that work together, I found a very small little startup company that did teacher observation platform, and kind of fell in love with them. They became Bloomboard, and about 14 years ago, I transitioned into their position as chief learning officer, which was a scary and really rewarding leap. So I spent a decade there before I left to begin my own work here with you all. So long, I'll tell you how old I am, long career in education.
But safe to say you've worn many hats in education. And so
Indeed,
like many teachers. And two, as we talk about this webinar today, it's not just teachers, but it's district leaders, it's school administrators, and you have walked all those paths. So take us back to the moment you start thinking of leaving, education from that side of things. Can you just take us back and kind of walk us through that?
Yeah. If you told me that I was going to leave education, I would have told you were crazy. Like I really, my world was teaching and was being in classrooms. And I was kind of known as an agitator. Like I was very much about changing the public school
Yeah.
system and innovating, and thought that I would be doing that from inside schools for my entire career. And when I actually, really one of the pivotal moments was when I met this small little company and realized like what an amazing product it was and how it was really transforming what we were doing, and creating transparent and fair and supportive observations for teachers.
Yeah.
My network at Puck was established. I'd built, strong superintendents of instruction, all the things that I'd kind of been doing and creating along the way on my own. I'd given off to people who were probably doing it better than I did to begin with. And when I didn't want to move on and start over with another network. I didn't want to take over a large public school as a superintendent. That just wasn't where I was going. And so I had a young daughter at the time. She was 5. We'd lost my husband a few years back. And I really was beginning to crave some flexibility in schedule. As you all know, like when you're leading a school network and you're leading schools, you are there on campus first thing, oftentimes late into the evening. I was at all my campus events at night. And so long daily slog, late nights.
Yeah.
And I was really seeking a little more flexibility, and I was seeking a challenge. Like I knew how to run schools well, and it was rewarding. And so when Bloom Board came, we were working together, and they offered me an opportunity to move over and do that work. I was scared to death, but I took the leap. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it is a scary leap, and I like that you said agitator. I think people
Mm.
describe me like that too, so we share that similar
Well, that's
similar
probably why we
thread
get
there.
along so well together as
Yeah,
as
it is. I
as
think so.
partners. Yeah.
I think so. But
Yeah.
I mean, you hit it there at the end. Scary like jump and leap there. So like, what emotions were you feeling? I mean, you kind of said some of the excitement of like seeing something you could step into that fit your kind of passions. But what other feelings and emotions do you have during that decision process?
Between just being afraid of the scary and the unknown, quite frankly, the primary emotion that bubbled up was guilt. Like I felt
Hmm.
an intense amount of guilt. In fact, my friends and family were like, "I don't want to talk to you about this anymore. Like you have to get
Yeah.
over this guilt." I think because I had labeled myself as like a lifelong educator, and because I was this innovator and wanted to, change, really rewrite some of the wrongs that were in education. It felt that I was abandoning the cause that I'd held so dear for so many years. Um, I felt a lot of fear of judgment. I really felt that people would judge me for leaving. I had developed a very strong leadership network across the country through the Gates Foundation work. And I did, quite honestly, I did receive some of that. Like, what
Hmm.
you're really kind of dirty. You're going to the other side. What kind of
Yeah.
thing. And even as someone who was at that point, I was I was in my 40s and well established. And a pretty confident. People who know me know that like I'll come on pretty strong, but I had a huge fear of failure. Like
Hmm.
even though I knew the education side and I knew this company, I was really afraid. Like I'm leaving this well-established family that in at Puck schools that I'd helped build, and what if I fell on my butt and didn't make it? Like there was a huge amount of that fear. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I relate to that as well. And I think that's a little bit what our students feel in classrooms, right? They feel fear of failure,
Mhm.
of like being afraid to mess up.
And
And
what do we
so,
tell them, Tommy, when our students are afraid, right?
100%. I think some of that is just following, like we've talked about, following that same advice we've kind of given students. And
Yeah.
so, what, in that sense, like if you could go back to your past self or like
Mhm.
speaking to someone who's kind of in that same situation, they feel like they're on the fence, feeling the same emotions you have felt. What advice would you give them?
God, I wish I'd even given this advice to me then. It probably would have made things a lot smoother. I
Yeah.
think first is getting clarity on your why. As people
Hmm.
join the community, you see that we put why front and center. It's something we believe very strongly in, that ethos of understanding your motivation and your what your desired impact is. I think doing that deep reflection really matters. If you're running away from something that you haven't named yet, chances are you're going to run right back to it, right? And
Yeah.
so, why? Um, why was I really even feeling the pull to leave? I mean, some of the things that I feel like I articulated very easily to you at the top of this, I
Mhm.
couldn't have done back then, right? And so,
Yeah.
really spending the time to say, what is it that is causing me to even question that this isn't my path anymore. Secondly, I think honest self-assessment of your skills, right? So, and when I say that, it's beyond the skills in the context of your current job, right? Like I knew I could tell you 20 things I did really well as a chief academic officer, as a teacher, as a principal. But what are those skill sets in a generalized sense? So, for example, as a CAO, I was leading instruction.
Hmm.
And when I was doing that, I was building scalable systems. I was aligning cross-functional teams to do that. I was bringing in our curriculum folks. Once we were rolling out curriculum, I had to bring in principals and then teachers and parents. And basically I was translating complex needs into a very um, manageable strategy, right? And so those are the same skill sets that drive product decisions, customer success models, and business growth in EdTech. And so, but at the time, I could never have made that transition, right? And so, I think even just really thinking through, like, what do you think you do well? And then use a chat, an AI, tool, and say, like, how do these translate to the business sector? I think before you go all out, I'm a doer. Like I'm on the fence, but when I say I do it, I do it. So go slow, get curious first, like really, have some low stakes conversations with people in roles that you're interested in. If you're here tonight, you're already taking that first step. And test the waters, right? Like just go into those small steps.
Yeah, I think that first thing you said, I mean, that's something we talk about a lot, right? Like your why. And like I think sometimes too it's jumping to, okay, if I'm not a teacher, if I'm not an administrator, what role am I going to do?
Yeah.
So why would you say a why is important? Like why is it important to slow down and really figure out why you're doing something before you really know what you're going to do? Or like why is that why important?
Well, I think just personally, for one, it will help you decide where you go. When we say EdTech is vast, vast, vast,
Yeah.
vast, right? And so knowing what your why is and what you care about, like if you really care about equitable access to STEM for kids, and that was your passion in schools, there is a place for you somewhere outside of schools that do that.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important. I also think, one of the things that we do in our academies with both our client success and our sales professionals is we have them really dig deep into their why, about why they're passionate about education in general, because that's a connection, right? That's a connection point you make with people inside education. And for me, knowing your why so that you can communicate that to people you're talking about just as you're getting curious and learning more so that they can help guide you to where they think would be a best place for you in interviews, really sitting very deeply into that why.
Hmm.
Once you find the right position for you, leading with that why with your district partners, just like you would as an educator inside the district, is really critically important.
Yeah, I think too, like sometimes it's people are so focused on maybe leaving something, but like what are you going towards? And then
Yeah,
like what is your kind of North Star? Like what's your compass? What's directing you to that next thing? Because you don't want to just move to a next thing. You want to make sure that thing you move to is something you're passionate about and it connects
yeah.
to who you are. And I think it's also on that lines, you brought up skills, like do a skills
Mhm.
assessment. And so, what did that look like for you? And like, what skills did you feel like, wow, I feel like this translates? And then, what
Mhm.
skills or gaps did you feel like, I, I feel like I have gaps here, right? Like, that didn't feel like they translated.
Yeah. So systems thinking for sure. Like even as teachers, so not just as a CAO, but as a teacher, you are one of the best experts in systems thinking that there is. Like,
Yeah.
I want a teacher with great classroom management, like rethinking my systems and processes and standard operating procedures in any business that I run. Right. So I think that's the first one. Um, Cross-functional leadership. So again, even teachers, you're operating with your peer teachers, your principals, coaches, parents. Working across all of those different stakeholder groups is really critically important. Relationship building for me, probably I should have led with that. Like
Um,
that is my heart. Your ability to build relationships and communicate effectively in those relationships is so important. And then for me, coaching and adult learning translated specifically from my position to the outside business world, because as chief learning officer, that was really one of the core things that I did that was
yeah.
critically important. Yeah.
Those are so helpful, and like a lot of those skills, they transfer. And we've talked about this before. Like sometimes your skills are
Mm.
like Lego blocks, right? And you're building
Yeah.
something in the classroom, and you build this beautiful contraption with all these blocks, and like you can then take those Lego blocks, those skills you have to build something else somewhere else, right? But sometimes you have to then learn how to build that something else. Whether it's that new role. So like, how
Well,
did you
so,
do
can
that?
I add to that for a second? Part of it also too is getting rid of your imposter syndrome, right? I
Mm,
think so many educators feel like, oh, and I don't say this because I'm just an educator, I'm just a teacher,
yeah,
and business feels very scary and foreign and corporate and different, and I'm not going to do well in that. So part of that is like just unburdening yourself of
yeah,
that imposter syndrome and thinking ask, like, I know I'm
yeah.
really good at this, how does this translate to this context? So I mean, I think that's really important. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, I know you were
No,
moving us on,
I
but
I I
yeah.
think that's great, and I think, like, how do you feel like someone can navigate. I mean, on one side, there's imposter syndrome, like, I don't feel like I'm good at anything, like, woe is me, kinda despair, like, I don't have any skills to transfer, and then on the other side, it's maybe like, I have all the skills I need A1
Ah,
to transfer, like, so, like,
yeah.
how does someone walk through that, like, not being an imposter and feeling you don't have anything, but then over kind of, like, valuing your skills in that regards?
Yeah, well, I will tell you, I probably waffled between both of those things. Like I went in feeling like, I was the chief academic officer of a leading charter network in LA that was, you know, over 800 API in
Yeah.
11 of our 12 schools, and I got this, right. I know everything to know. But what I found out is that when you step out of we all know the alphabet soup of education, like all of the acronyms and the things that we need to know. And when you as an educator are talking to somebody and we're rambling up, they're like, what did you just say? It sounded like the peanut parents, wah, 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 right? And
Yeah.
you have to translate that. It is probably worse, or maybe it's just worse because you're used to your own nomenclature. But I needed to learn to speak the business language. So,
Mhm.
KPIs, ROIs, ACV, pipeline, segmentation. I'm like, I had never felt so dumb. And I was an English teacher, right? Like
Yeah.
vocabulary is my thing. And I just felt like I was swimming in this, this pool of knowledge that I felt out of my depth in. And so, um, I overcame that by asking a lot of questions and realizing my worth. So I actually brought all of that other language that my sales reps didn't know, and our founder and our
Mhm.
CEO didn't know, and really tried to create an environment where we both felt vulnerable enough to say, "What is that? What were you just saying? What was IEP? What was that?" Like, and always make it safe to either front load language so that the other side was understanding, or just simply ask the question. I think that was really important. Um, I really was trying to think about, in many ways, we think about schools moving at a really, really fast pace. That's
Yeah.
the sort of daily fast pace, but we operate on yearly cycles, right? Like we kind of have the same pace. Yes, we take on new initiatives, but oftentimes in the business sector, you are pivoting weeks, days, like just, and reminding myself when those things happened and I felt a little uncomfortable that I know how to make fast decisions. Anybody in a classroom with 31 5-year-olds knows how to make fast decisions, right? Again, just continue to translate those things that you already know. Um,
Yeah.
data driven decision making. Like we do this in schools with data. But when I would look at an Excel spreadsheet with our revenue targets and all the data and our client, our CRM, I was like, oh my, I didn't know what to do. So
Yeah.
really just taking the time to slow down, honor that I don't have to know it all, and that I can ask questions, and that there are probably more parallels when you peel the onion back than you realize.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean that, like, start with your why, like, go slow, like, figure out
Mm,
why you're doing what you're doing, assess your skills, where do you thrive, where do you need to grow, and we talk a lot about this too, this idea of, like, having a portfolio where you
mm,
can demonstrate, like you said, relationship building. I mean, you're building relationships, every day in schools, right? But having a portfolio to show how you can take that skill and bring it
yeah.
into a new role. And so maybe just, yeah, speak on the idea of, like, what role do you think a portfolio and, like, demonstrating how those skills can look like in that new role?
Well, what's so funny is like I started teaching in 1991, and even back then, I had my teacher portfolio, and it was one of those
Mm,
scrapbooky things that was like this big and like huge with pictures and borders and stickers and all the things. But I think educators really understand the value of a portfolio. Um, they understand they work with their kids to build portfolios. They've done it as they go in and work in jobs. I think that particularly uh, for educators who are considering transitioning into a different role and having an impact in a different way. Um, you would think businesses are going to be jumping up and down to get me because I know
mhm.
education, right? They need that proof that you actually can translate those
Yeah.
skills, right? And so having evidence and proof that you can do that, I think, is a differentiator. Most
Mhm.
corporate interviews, people aren't coming in with portfolios or brag books or those kinds of things. So, one, it's a differentiator. Two, it just really can help elevate that idea of crosswalking, how powerful your skills from education can be in the business environment.
100% because hiring people is risky, and you want to make sure
Mm-hmm.
like you're telling a story not just with your words, but you can demonstrate actions. And
You know,
so,
particularly
yeah, go
now,
ahead.
Tommy, like finding work is hard everywhere,
Yeah.
and so anywhere where you can differentiate yourself as somebody who already has proven competency to do some of the work, I think is critical.
Yeah, and we talk about that in the free course we have of like
Mm.
using feedback, right? So if you're not getting further in the hiring process, like looking like, am I telling my story in my resume? Do I have a
Right.
portfolio that demonstrates what I can do? And do I have the necessary education and knowledge to kind of do this as well? And like all those pieces are part of the process. And
Yeah, for
um,
sure.
what kind of transition to this ed tech, right? Like K through 12.
Mm.
Why do you think K through 12 companies, ed tech companies, are like such a natural bridge for educators? You mentioned knowing some of
Mm.
the language, like you have that side of things, but why do you think it is a natural bridge in that regards?
I think for one, let me talk first for educators. I think it allows you to extend the impact that you already care about, right? Like
Yeah.
it's one thing leaving the classroom and going into marketing or going into some other completely different area where you're still not connected to education. So when you're transitioning into ed tech, you're instead of supporting your one school, your one classroom, your one network, your insights and your skills and your gifts and your can really shape and tools that impact entire systems, right? Like entire
Mhm.
districts and states. I think that was actually the first time I really realized the impact that I was having at Bloomboard. We developed a competency based teacher credentialing program that was accredited, and it was all online. It was for para educators who had AAs, could get their teaching credentials and serve the students that they've already been serving in the communities that they live. And it gets me emotional just talking about it. And I'm like, wow, that was something that we had tried to do something for years with our paras at Puck and just didn't have the reach or the power and the connections. And I'm like, here I've done it, right? So it gives
Yeah.
me goosebumps. Like when you find the right fit, and not every ed tech company is going to be the right fit, right? And so
Yeah.
that we can talk a little more about that later. But so the first thing is that it's a great bridge because you're not leaving education, right?
Mhm.
You're extending the impact that you already care about. We already talked about it mirroring the skills, like the skill set that educators need are incredibly um, translatable and needed. Your perspective as educators are so needed in ed tech. Well-meaning, but oftentimes they are selling a product, not a partnership, right? And
Yeah.
so we know that the best ed tech companies out there are are becoming long-term trusted partners and advisors with the districts that they work with, right? And so um, in ed tech, they often understand the technology very deeply, but not the realities of teaching and running schools. And so that perspective that educators bring really bridges that gap. Um, and again, I just feel like it helps educators um, go into companies and help them stay mission anchored. Like
Yeah.
the more educators there are in a company, whenever I was in Bloomboard, I was like, I'm so happy that I found another value driven company with people who are passionate about education. I was so afraid. Well, quite frankly, we were over 50% educators at Bloomboard. So not surprising that happened. So we get to bring a lot of that heart and that mission centric approach, when we bridged. So that's helpful, I think.
Yeah, I would say when you're in a room with educators or former educators, you know you're around good people. Yeah, so
Yeah, and
it's
they're going to tell you too, aren't they? They're going to give you the advice. So
yeah, it's good people, good company.
yeah.
And you mentioned the idea of impact and
Hmm.
like that translating, and you know, we say in the communities like we want to transform education from outside the classroom. And so, wait, was there a moment when you like, did you know, kind of going into Bloomboard, like that? Hey, I'm taking this impact, like, or was that like a process of realizing, hey, like, was it when you did kind of this teacher credential program with the professionals that you realized, like, wow, like I'm able to still make that impact? Was that a moment? Was that a process? Maybe talk about when you
Yeah,
realized you could still make impact.
it really happened immediately. So if you're in an ed tech startup, they pivot. So you could go on
Yeah.
and with a product you love, and then they pivot and move into something else, right? And so when I started with Bloomboard, we were doing teacher observation platforms. It's a product that I used as an educator. I felt really strongly about it. And when it was so much hard work and so much energy to get that rolled out in our system of 13 schools, and I was so proud of that, and I'm still proud of it. um, my
Hmm.
first my first organization that I worked with when I moved to Bloomboard was the state of Arkansas, and they were rolling out their teacher um, uh, support system across the state, and I was it. We were a very small company. I was the only implementation person, and I worked with the State Department to figure out how to translate their entire evaluation process into our platform. I ran their statewide training program, so I'm like, "Whoa! Like I know how to do this. This is amazing!" And it dawned on me as I was driving one very long summer to 7 different universities in Arkansas to roll out training to principals across the entire state, because this was not an optional. This was everybody
Yeah.
was doing it. That I just had my finger. I will have had my finger, and our company will have had our finger and our imprint, our thumbprint on every classroom in the state of Arkansas. And that was
That's
kind of
cool.
a whoa moment, right? Like it was
Yeah.
like there's some real ability here, that when you match with the right product and the right people, like you can just really expand your impact
Yeah.
in exponential ways.
I even saw that within even education of going from a
Mm.
teacher. I started as teacher assistant, teacher, and then going to school administration. Like you, at each level, you're kind of like impact changed, but sometimes it got to a bigger extent where you could actually make a larger impact across, you know, the entire school versus just a
Yeah,
classroom. So,
yeah,
um, it's in that sense, it's you're still making impact, and it's just sometimes a different way, and maybe to a greater scope to what you said.
yeah, for sure.
Um, we talked about kind of fears and like your emotions processing before you made the jump, but like
Hmm.
what fears and emotions came a year into after your transition, 2 years? Like, how'd you kind of process maybe that imposter syndrome? Did you feel that at all, or like, and kind of what emotions came up after making the jump?
Every day. I think I was there a decade, and I still think at year 10, I was still going, well,
Yeah.
someday they're going to find out that I'm really not a business person, so yeah, that persisted. Um, you do miss the day to day of
Mm,
kids, and so I found ways. One of the things that was so rewarding for me is that so many ed tech companies do on the ground work, roll out training. They're on campuses, meeting with prospects before they sign on. They do pilots, and so finding those ways to stay um, connected to the day-to-day classroom, if that's what really drives you and matters to you. Some people are like, nope, that's not what matters to me. That's fine too. um, I
yeah.
think also, I had a misconception that I built a network of schools for 14 years. These were my family. I had, you know I saw teachers come on as their first year and meet other
Mhm.
teachers in my network and get married and have babies, and like this was my
Yeah.
extended family. And I thought that I was going to really have to leave that behind when I went into business, where I'm like, they're customers, and you work with a customer and you move on. In the best companies, you are not selling something for a year, right? You are proving impact in the classroom. You are figuring out what's next. You're figuring out how to expand that impact across their network. And we had, like I told you, my first work was in the State Department of Arkansas. We
Yeah.
we worked with them for 8 years until they built their own
Wow.
system. And I am dear friends with people all, and I can twang with the best of them now, right? So I realized that I wasn't losing that. I
Yeah.
really wasn't. And I just was also, I think the other fear, I was just really worried, particularly in sales, which is kind of funny since we've now built an entire sales academy that I
Yeah.
was the author of, that I wouldn't understand the language. And I still don't. Like, we have partners, Paul Schiffman and Tom Davis, who are kind of on the sales side of our partnership. And they say things that I'm still like, let me look that up real quickly. I probably should know what that acronym means, or what's the difference between those two things. And so, again, just being, nobody's going to know it all. Just
Yeah.
don't be afraid to ask questions.
100%. It may or may not have been a call recently where someone said a term and I'm like Googling it as I'm in the conversation to
Good. I'm so glad it's not just me, Tommy. That's great.
pretend like I knew what they're talking about. So, but I just love that idea of impact and like being able to thread that through and like still working through you know, those fears and emotions kind of working through that process. And so, no, I appreciate your vulnerability there. And we do have a kind of a question from the Q&A here. I'll pull up. Please talk about your evolution as a school teacher, school site administrator, private sector leader to an entrepreneur. So we've kind of touched on that, but is there anything else you want to talk about in your evolution going from classroom teacher to where you are now?
I think we've covered a lot of that. I am so surprised at the amount of growth that I had at Bloom Board after I'd left the daily work of schools, understanding maybe what I was doing well or not doing well in the
Yeah.
daily work of schools, if that makes sense. There's so many things that I when I was working with other clients, and talking with other chief academic officers and superintendents, that I would kind of pat myself on the back and go, yeah, you did a good job of that. And I think as an educator, moving into the business sector, I didn't really realize how much advising I would actually really be able to do in those situations. And I saw um, uh, people who are coming in as client success managers, as teachers, who would come to me and say, "Wow, like, I can't believe they didn't think about that." But in this conversation, I brought a solution that they took back, and it really worked. And I'm so excited, right?
Yeah.
So, I think just allowing um, unpacking and expanding that idea of impact, right? Like, for
Mhm.
me, impact was never going to be good enough if I wasn't in the right there with kids every day and I could see their
Yeah.
faces and see the aha. Um, but just acknowledging the impact change, and that it can be equally powerful as from outside of the classroom as it is inside.
Yeah. And you brought that idea of advisor. Like I felt like as a teacher, I was always trying to convince students like, hey, we're on the same team. Like I'm your partner in this, and that's like when we really got like just you saw growth in the classroom when you got to partner with students. And like I think another aspect of that bridge, like why teachers do so or educators do so well in edtech, is because you continue to be a partner. You're not just someone
Mhm.
pushing a product or pushing a service or just trying to get a contract signed. And so we talk about that idea, like how did being an advisor and a trusted partner in schools and all those roles help translate in the edtech sector of being that partner in a different way to schools on the other side?
Can you rephrase that, Tommy? I'm sorry. I'm not sure I capture. I got
Yeah, I
that.
think this idea of like being a partner and trusted advisor, right, in the classroom,
Yep.
and in ed tech with sales, it's not just pushing a product. You continue to be a partner, right? Or with client success, it's not just signing a contract at renewal, but it's being a trusted advisor all throughout the school year. So how did you again take that idea of being a trusted advisor from the classroom, from education, and
Mm.
into ed tech?
Yeah, I really think it comes down to being a really good listener and observer and question asker, like those three things. Like, we know that when we're assessing learning or we're assessing a teacher's needs, like, listening to them and really
Yeah.
trying to understand what their core root problem is, what they're struggling with, what those emotions are behind it, and why it matters. And then really thinking through and walking side by side as a collaborator, not a do, like,
Yeah.
not, I'm telling you to do this. So much of that translates to good work in with ed tech companies. We teach in our sales academy. We teach our sales professionals Before you ever talk about your product or a feature of your product, you need to uncover what the district's pain point is.
Yeah.
What are they really struggling with, and how does your solution or suite of solutions support that and impact that? Like, how does it match, and what impact can they expect to see back in the classroom? And quite frankly, if it's not a match, don't sell it. Because you're
Mhm.
not, you're going to have longer success out of creating long-term partners that are getting use out of your product and wanting to expand. And when you bring on another product, they're like, we trust you, let's go, right? And
Yeah.
so I think those three things are really critically important. Goes to the same thing with our client success managers, like really, really walking side by side um, their district partners and implementation, understanding, being thoughtful. Like in classrooms, you can foresee where the problems are going to be. Like you need to be with itness, right? Like, well, that's going to go wrong. I'm going to nip that in the bud. Same thing
Mhm.
in the when you're helping with implementation, like bringing that same expertise, helping them look long term, understanding what success looks like ahead of time,
Yeah.
and helping them navigate to it as a partner.
Yeah. And I think that's just something educators get going into business, that especially in ed tech, right? Like as teachers, you're not just pushing an assignment, or principals, you're not just pushing like it's a new product, but you understand that there's care and there's thought and it's this
Yeah,
long-term partnership. And so I think that's just a skill and a mindset that translates so well into ed tech and, working with schools on the other side of things.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
what would you, people listening to this conversation, and feel free if you have any questions, please drop them in the Q&A section. We can get to them. Um, what do you hope people take away from this conversation today?
Mm.
What's kind of like summarize? What are some of the main points, that the aha moments you want them to have?
We're going to get into therapy here in the last 7 minutes. Is that what we're doing? This is good. I love this.
Exactly. Yeah. Let's get
Um,
deep.
I think first that it's okay to evolve. Right? Like
Hmm.
it is okay to want something different than what you're currently doing as a teacher or an administrator. Those are incredibly rewarding, but in many times just they are. I don't want to use the word soul sucking, but they're exhausting, right? Like
Hmm.
exhausting. And if there's something, if you want to do something different, even though you've dedicated years to learners, it's okay to open a new chapter, right? Whether
Yeah.
that is continuing to expand your impact into something like EdTech, or to go to completely something different. And if you do choose to go into an EdTech role, when your role changes, your impact doesn't. I think
Yeah.
that's really important. We impact is in the title of this webinar, because I think that's something that took me a long time to really understand. Um, your impact can still last and actually expand. We
Yeah.
talked a lot of these. Your skills are more transferable than you even realize, right? Like just do some of that deep dive to understand. Like the reason teaching is so hard, and being a principal, being an educator in general is so hard. It is one of the most complex, multifaceted, jobs anybody can do.
Yeah.
I would put up a kindergarten teacher against a brain surgeon. Like, and we went side by side about the decisions and
Yeah.
the complexity of systems and the background processing that's going on. That's a lot. Somebody's probably going to
Yeah.
ding me for saying that, but I think honor your skill set, and know that you're not just a kindergarten teacher. Like you have this list of skills that is incredibly valuable in other contexts.
Hmm.
You can always go back. Like they're
Yeah.
always going to want educators and teachers. So we are not encouraging happy teachers and educators who are making an impact and love what they do to leave. We
Yeah.
are, you can always go back if it's not for you. That your story still belongs in education, if that's what you want. Whether you're in schools supporting them, or outside supporting them along the way, and that your voice and experience really, really matters in this ecosystem, no matter which
Yeah.
side of the table you're sitting on.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the most used word in this webinar has been this idea of impact. And it's
Impact, yeah.
what we named the communities and academies. Like, again, we were focused on our why, like impacting K through 12. So maybe just touch a little bit, like, what is the K through 12 pack impact community and academies? Like,
Yeah,
what's kind of the
yeah.
vision behind it, and what is it?
So the K-12 Impact Community is a free space where folks from both sides of the table we've been talking about, educators, and it doesn't even have to be educators who want to transition. Educators just want their
Mhm.
voice to be heard. to companies that sell into K-12 markets, so that they can know what they need and be part of that conversation about bringing these two sides together to create really good tools to impact students. That's great. People like you all that are on today, educators who are dipping their toe in the water and maybe thinking about transitioning. It's a great place to go and ask questions and learn more. And as we said, we have sales professionals, we have sales leaders, we have client success managers, we have VPs of client success in our academy. So it's a really unique community where you're bringing folks together that have a common why and passion for kids and learning into the community. And so there you'll have discussion boards where you can have open conversations. We have webinars like this one that you're attending today, and Tommy's walking you through. We'll have a whole events board. We have, today this webinar is for transitioning educators. We have one coming up on funding, where we're going to sort of match educators that understand, what their funding sources are with EdTech companies. Lots of resources. So we have articles for both sides. Tips and tricks for creating best onboarding as a client success manager, or what do you need to know if you're a teacher who wants to get into client success? So lots of resources there for you to explore. And then lastly, I think you might mention it, Tommy, there's a free course. It's a great thing to do over the holidays. If you're interested in exploring a little more about how your skills translate and whether, we really highlight two sort of major roles for educator, sales professionals and client success managers. And it takes you through 5 days of kind of guided reflection and exercises to give you some idea about where does your skill set match. So something that would be, that you'd be interested in doing. And then, so that's kind of on the free side, and that's constantly growing. We'll be having, all kinds of activities and ongoing webinars and adding resources as we go along. In addition, we have our paid academies. And so our academies are very structured 8-week programs that are competency-based. So you actually are building a portfolio in the one pathway through those academies, our pro pathway. You are interacting with AI role play software. So you're actually working with district leaders as a sales professional, as a client success manager. So you're getting to practice the skills before you're in the line of fire on the front line with actual in that position. So it's a baseline foundation for those two roles of content where you're able to practice, you're able to build a portfolio and get real support and coaching from experts like this group that have been both on the sales side and on the district side.
Yeah. No,
How'd I do,
great
Tommy?
summary.
It's your community too. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about it, but I mean, the free course, right? We dive in. A lot of it came from our experience and things that mindset we changed and things we wish we would have known. And we help you build your why. And you'll see here in the community, there's a space to go and share your why, right? And I think what's cool is you can go through and hear what other people's whys are, and educators, VPs of sales, like people make an impact on all different roles within education. And I mean, even if you want to share something, you have a question, you want to celebrate a win, get some feedback, this is a great place to do that as well. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And so this has been an amazing conversation. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Again, you've made history. This is our first webinar, first of many to come. Like you said, we have a webinar in December talking about funding and how to understand, how districts make decisions. And, like I said, this is a fun, insightful conversation. And so thank you to Kelly for being vulnerable. I mean, sharing your story, really just kind of showing all of us what it can look like to continue to make impact and transform education from outside the classroom. So, and like Kelly said, if you're here tonight and where do I start? Where's my next step? You can enroll in our free course, Breaking into K-12 Sales and Client Success. And it's free, it's practical, and like we said, it's built by people who've walked that same path and had to ask those same questions. And if you want to learn more about our academies, you can do so on k12impact.com. And you also can book a clarity call to, see if one of these academies would be a great fit for you. And so thank you for being here tonight. I'm honored to be a part of your journey as you explore what it looks like to transform education just from outside the classroom. So have a good night and adios.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.